Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome, future lawyers. Welcome, Jennifer.
Yes, thank you.
Jennifer, there you are. Hi, good to
friends.
see you. Hello. I am Celeste Pagano-Bowles. I'm the Director of Content and Instruction here at BarMax. Jennifer is one of our most, if not our most experienced law tutors and teachers on staff, having worked with students in everything from academic success as well all the way up to bar preparation, both at law schools and now with BarMax for the last few years. I'm also a former law professor, and I've been with BarMax since 2019. So today we are talking about retake or break. This is, not an easy time for you guys, and we know that. We know that if you are here today, it's because you have probably been unsuccessful on a bar exam recently. Today's session is focused mostly on the California bar. The advice will apply to everyone, no matter what bar, but when I do go through score reports today, I'll be going through California ones. There's another webinar I did recently on where we covered UBE score reports, and that will post to the TestMax YouTube page shortly. So along with this one, so you'll have that there. And the reason I begin by acknowledging that it's hard because it's okay that it's hard. You are in really good company. Lots of people have been where you are today. And they are out there practicing law now, successfully, competently, having a career as lawyers. So going through this more than once, is a kind of normal thing for a lot of people, especially in California. But it's also a really difficult and challenging thing because we know that you feel stuck and you want to get on with your life. So we're here to both kind of help you today to make the decision about whether to retake or break. And I'm going to talk a little bit about score reports, performance, and the other factors that go into that decision. But then I'm going to turn it over to Jen, and she's going to talk about, hey, maybe, what are the reasons that people fail? And what are the things that we can change to give you success going forward next time, which is important, right? Whether that's going to be for you right now in July, I'm saying right now, it's May when we're doing this, but the July bar is the next bar, or whether you're going to be doing it in February or another time, we want you to find success. Also, with the goal of finding success, we want to let you know a bit about BarMax, and I'll, if there's time at the end, I would love to demo our program, our features, and even if you know BarMax, we've made some changes to the user interface lately so that when you go to access past essays, the welcome packet is set up differently so that you have them right there at your fingertips along with the answers. And I will show you how to navigate to that to make sure everybody knows. But again, we'll do that at the end, and I will take Q&A and all that so that the people who just want to be here for the nuts and bolts of the presentation can leave after that if you want to. We offer tutoring one-on-one in addition to our bar prep programs. And that is a great option if you find that you're stuck in some particular area of the exam and need extra one-on-one attention, or just somebody to guide you along the way and make sure you're sticking to your plan. They can be coaches, they can be subject matter teachers, they can be teachers on writing. All of our California bar teachers, including Jennifer, are really equipped to do all of those things. With that, what considerations are we thinking about when deciding whether to take the bar again? Some are performance considerations, and should say that on the left, performance, and some are more like life considerations. How close was your score? What study schedule and methods did you use? Because sometimes you might learn from Jennifer, oh my goodness, I was not using study methods that were going to be the most efficient or effective for me. So if I can change those things, or, I didn't get any help with my essays at all, and I didn't turn in any essays to, anyone for review. I didn't use the 10 free essay reviews that come with my BarMax program, or I only use 2 or 3 of them. Then we say, aha, here's a place where you can make some easy gains, and, you are more likely to succeed next time. So we want to think about your performance, both how you studied, how close your score was, how things went exam week. Did you get violently ill? I did have a student who got stomach flu during not stomach flu, what do you call that? Food poisoning during the MBE. So she's done all her writing, it went pretty well. She goes to take the MBE. Halfway through the day, she's feeling queasy. So she's just fighting nausea for the second half of the MBE, goes home and throws up for 3 days. It was for 2 days. It was really bad. And started pretty much throwing up at 4 o'clock, and she was done from there. She passed, but barely, I think if it had hit her a couple hours earlier, did something like that happen to you? Did you lose a lot of sleep the week of the exam, or, have some sort of life stressor hit you right before the exam that your last minute preparation was not what it could have been? So we think of those as performance factors. But then we also look at your life while you're studying. Are you facing burnout? Have you taken the bar twice in a row now and you're saying, enough is enough, I can't stare at an outline or an MBE problem again, I will throw my computer out the window. Then it's okay to take a break and come back when you can focus. Because if you're really burned out, you won't be devoting the time you need to studying anyway, and it won't have your attention. So go focus on the other parts of your life that might need your attention, like your job. You might have financial concerns because you did take time off work and you need to work more. Or maybe you have family obligations, children that you look after, or, sick relatives, elderly people. We've seen it all, where there might be multiple things going on, and it might even be your own illness that you're managing, and you need to do a better job of taking care of yourself. Hey, those are good reasons to pull back and take a break. So let's get into those score reports. I'm not scribbling on it this time, so we're just going to have to talk this one through. This one's actually pretty easy. We're going to come back to this one. Let's look at, oh, that's a tough one too. This is my, No. Let's go to the first one. I'm sorry, I'm looking at a few. I'm like, oh, these are all rough. Why did I start with these hard ones? So yeah, let's look at this student here and make sense, because you've got this score report and it has all these numbers and you want to understand them. Okay, down at the bottom is, what's the most important number, right? What was my total scaled score? This person got a 1318. 0.5. I'm thinking of it as 1319, but it's a 1318.55. Okay. She needs a 13, and I think this one was a woman. I don't know. It's a while ago. She needs a 1390 in order to pass. So we see that she's in the ballpark, but has fallen a little short. Now, if we go right above that and we look at scaled MBE, scaled written, what does that mean? The scaled MBE score here. Well, okay, first of all, if each half were 1390 or above, she would have passed. Because what the California bar does is they take those two numbers, add them together, and divide by 2. So they average those two numbers, and the average of those two numbers needs to be 1390 or above. Okay. I'm going to pause for just a minute here. If you have questions and want to ask later so that Jennifer and I answer them toward the end of this webinar, then put them in Q&A. I forgot to mention that earlier. Whereas if you have questions about BarMax as we go along, or you have specific need with your program, or you want that upgrade or whatever, Katie, my colleague, is in chat. So you can write something in chat and she will take care of you there. Or if you need to somehow give shout out to each other, do it in chat, but as direct messages, not distracting, by writing lots of messages that everybody has to read. So that little announcement aside, we've looked at this score. We've seen that the scaled MBE average of those two numbers is too low. I mean, the total scaled score average of those two numbers is too low. But if we look at the MBE by itself, 1436. Okay, so for those of us in UBE states, that would be the equivalent of a 143.6. And it's higher than needed for passing in any jurisdiction. It's higher than 1390. So this student did really well on the MBE. In fact, let's look over to the right, all those numbers on the right. What is this MBE percent below? This is not what percentage of questions you got right or wrong. That is very confusing to people. This is percentile. So if we look down at the bottom, local and national percentile, let's work from the bottom up. On the bottom right, it says her national percentile MBE was 54.5. That means 54.5% of the people nationally who took this particular administration of the MBE scored lower than she did. And only 45.5, is that the math? Anyway, only 45% scored higher than she did. So she was in the top half nationally for the MBE. That is pretty darn solid. Okay. Locally in California, where the scores tend to be a little lower because California does allow people without JDs from US law schools to take the bar exam, and people who don't have JDs from US law schools do tend to pass at slightly lower rates. So we have a higher number locally. That's just how she compares to everyone else in California. Okay. So that's what those two numbers are, her percentiles. What comes above them are her percentiles in each subject. So looking at torts, she was in the top 30% of the country in torts. 71.1% of the people in the country scored lower than she did in torts. When I said this person did well on the MBE, I was not kidding. She really kicked butt on a lot of these topics. Okay. Her weakest area was evidence. And this particular exam administration, where only 27.7% of the people in the country did worse than she did. It wasn't enough to really hurt her that much on the MBE because her MBE score overall was really high. So why did this person not pass the bar? This is where we need to look over at the left side of the page. Her scaled written score is 1201. Remember, she needs 1390. This is pretty low. She needs a 63 or above. Well, there's no such thing as a 63. So we want to aim for that 65 or above, but she needs these to average out to 63 or above in order to get that 1390. We want to see those numbers, that 50, 60, 50, 55, 60, 50. We need those to be 63 on average. So, let's get them up to 65 or above. So what this person probably did, I'm just guessing here, is focus a lot on the MBE. Practice a lot of MBE questions. Maybe they even did them using the open book active study method that we recommend, that Jen will show. Whatever they did on the MBE, it worked. But this person probably was banking on, I'll get a high MBE score and my essays don't matter as much. Unfortunately, both sides of the exam are so difficult and both sides are so heavy that you need to focus on both. So my advice to this student is take it again and get some help with your writing, get some intensive help with your writing, turn in essays to BarMax for review, watch some of our past office hours in BarMax. We have webinars on our YouTube page, but we also have many more videos that we've done like this that are just for BarMax students. They're available on the office hours page. We have specific ones that we would recommend you watch for different aspects of the writing part of the exam to improve there, and get some tutoring on your writing. Work one-on-one with a tutor. You can sit with a tutor where you're both kind of looking at the same essay at the same time and figuring out, okay, what would we change here to get the most points? This person may not have spent a lot of time learning the style of essay that California wants in order to give a lot of points, because she clearly learns rules. She had to know a lot of rules to get that MBE score. So it is not that this one did not know the rules. Maybe she didn't bother to learn the rules for community property, professional responsibility, whatever. I doubt it. I think mostly she probably didn't learn the rules, or didn't learn the format. The little, it's ugly. It's not a very nice style of writing, but it's very predictable what the California bar graders reward. Learn that, and you will be rewarded. So I think this person has a real potential to increase her score, and she should go for it, but know that she has to devote a lot of time to writing. And my big warning would be, don't ignore the MBE. Because just because you're strong at something in, say, July or February doesn't mean you're going to be strong at it the next administration, because you got there by preparing and a little bit of cramming at the end. So you've got to keep preparing. She doesn't need to prepare as much for the MBE as she did last time, but she needs to keep preparing. She needs to still take the MBE seriously, because it's so easy to forget all this stuff. The exam has way too much information to cram into your head. It's ridiculous. Let's admit it, right? So we want her to not forget that. Retain your strength by continuing to work on MBE, but really focus on a lot of writing. Okay, so I hope that helps you understand what the different numbers in these score reports mean. My next sample's a little weird because it has two different numbers next to the essays. First read, second read, actually three, and then operant grade. Why? What is this about? I just want to point out that if your score report looks like this, what it means is that your score was very close. Look at her total scaled score, 1364. If your score looks like it's above a certain point, the California Bar will have your essays regraded to make sure that some little bit of subjectivity in grading is not the difference between your pass and fail. So at least to try to make sure that. So they make somebody else review and score your essays again, and then they average those two scores to give you your operant grade. They don't do that for everyone, just people who are really close to passing. And unfortunately, when she got her essays regraded, some went up, some went down, her operant grade was still not enough. I mean, her overall scaled score was still not enough to pass. I would tell this person, keep working on your writing. You have some things that are very strong, but some things that are still weak. Let's figure out what that is. And then let's work on those weaker areas in your MBE, civil procedure, criminal law, real property. We recommend going through both MBE questions and essays in that area, open book, so that you can get to know the law very well in those areas, but continue to work on your strengths and contracts evidence. So that you don't lose those strengths. Okay. So again, this person definitely should go for it. She's within a hair's breadth of passing, and she just needs one more push to get her over the line. I'm calling this one a woman too, and I don't even know. this person, I'm looking at this one because I'm calling them all she, okay? Because she had a lower score. Because these are older. These are not any of you people here today. These are older scores. This is not like February 2023. These are from 2021, I think, for the most part. Anyway, the total scale score here is 1162. Remember, we're aiming for a 1390. So this is someone who needs to take a step back and, whoa, I need to change something major about my study. Maybe I didn't give it the attention I need to. Jennifer will talk about some of those things and, how to make that work for you. But I would look particularly, the person needs help both in writing and on the MBE. On the MBE, frankly, they were in the bottom 3%, or, only 3%, 3.1% of the country did worse than this person did on criminal law and procedure. And yet on constitutional law, she was a boss. So something about constitutional law clicked for this person, but the other MBE areas did not for the most part. So again, she might need some tutoring in those areas where she's weak, should go over lots of MBE questions and essay questions, slowly open book. But could this person really pass in July? Maybe. If she's studying full time, really devoting a lot to it, can get some tutoring, possibly. Most people who are retaking the bar are not studying full time. Let's admit, you guys are adults. Nobody pays you to sit home and do this. They pay you to go somewhere else or maybe sit home and do something else, right? They pay you to do work that is not studying for the bar. So you had less time to devote. Does that mean this person can't pass? No. But I would want this person to take a step back and say, okay, I'm going to give myself longer to prepare next time. I might take a little break now, but I'm going to come back in maybe September and give myself a 6-month plan for thoroughly covering everything, in the time that I have studying part-time between September and the February exam. That's the advice I would give this person. And along with that advice, I would share the BarMax Extended Study Plan. What we've done is we have made a more detailed study plan for people in this exact situation. People who have further to go to understanding and applying the law as it's tested on the bar exam. So it has a lot more practice. It has a ton of practice essays. And most importantly, it's spread out over a period of 4 to 6 months. It is adaptable from 4 to 6 months. It uses a concept called spaced repetition, where they're going to see each subject numerous times at, sort of planned intervals, first a little closer together, and then a little further apart. And it involves lots and lots of active practice. So, and most importantly, it takes that, all of that work that they have to do over 4 to 6 months and breaks it into 3 to 4 hour chunks. So the chunks are called blocks. It's a block kind of program rather than a days on a calendar kind of program. And that person can say, this is how many weeks I have. I have to do 5 blocks a week or 8 blocks a week. And I will schedule those 3 to 4 hour blocks in my schedule where they work, and I will just tick them off as I go. So somebody who has that kind of, that works also for foreign lawyers who are coming to the law or to the US law for the first time, or maybe have had a little bit of exposure. Now, I would tell this person, you can adapt that extended study plan a little bit because you clearly need less help in constitutional law than you do in the other areas. So there are sometimes areas where someone has a weakness or a strength, and they need to adjust in terms of more practice or a little less practice accordingly. Do not blow off any area of the exam because, like I said, people's weaknesses can become strengths and strengths can become weaknesses because anything you ignore can bite you in the butt. You want a balanced sort of practice overall, but put more emphasis on your strengths and on your weaknesses and a little less on your strengths. I hope that makes sense. So that's 3 different score reports, 3 different people, 3 different situations. I had one also for the attorney's exam, but then I decided to remove it. The attorney's exam is essays only. And again, you're looking at your essays, you're aiming for, I guess the one thing I would cover there is you're aiming for that. Let's look at this one for a second. This is not the attorney's exam, but when we're looking at the essay scores here, we're going to look in particular at essay 6. If you are taking the attorney's exam and you've been practicing law somewhere and were unsuccessful on the attorney's exam, I'm going to guess that essay 6 was high for you, because essay 6 was your performance test. And you probably knew how to do the performance test. Maybe not. Maybe you were being a perfectionist and you only got through section 1, then we got to work on your timing. But if you figured out the timing, if you practiced and figured out the timing, you know how to do a performance test, because that's what you do for work. You just do it over a more reasonable period of time. So you turn in a nice product instead of a slapdash product. That's what you're supposed to turn in on a bar exam. Again, not my favorite thing, but we got to play their game. Anyway, so if your performance test is higher than your other essays, it means that you need to learn the rules that are tested on the essays and do lots and lots of practice essays, both just reviewing them and then reviewing the California answer and also writing them, turning them into BarMax. So that's what I recommend for people on their essay writing, whether it's attorney's exam or not, but particularly those attorney's exam people. Those are people who are attorneys in another state, need to take the California bar because California is special and has reciprocity with no one, and we see students in that boat all the time. And a lot of them do very well, but if you're struggling, you just need to get help with your writing and learn the black letter law in those areas that are tested on the California essays. So I had a slide here, let me see, about scaling. And, if this is wrong, like Jennifer, you're going to correct me because you're the pro on this. In fact, the place to go, if you want to read a full explanation of it, is the California Bar website. They're actually quite open about the way they do scaling. But if I want to simplify that down, the way I understand it, and if I'm wrong, Jennifer is going to so kindly interrupt, but the way I understand it is that the MBE score is scaled nationally because the MBE is very standardized. Did you know that when you took the MBE, those 200 questions, only 175 were actually graded for your score? The other 25 are being tested. And they're being tested for, are they good questions? Or are they just, are they questions we have to toss? But they're also being tested for their difficulty. How many people get them right or wrong? Do the people who get it wrong tend to be lower scoring people overall, which would mean it's a difficult question? Or do high scoring people get it wrong and low scoring people guess right, in which case we wrote it wrong? They look at all that. But once they have a question that they know is good enough for prime time, they may have run it a few times as a tester. And they know, okay, now we know exactly statistically how difficult this is. So they are able to make every MBE scaled to the same difficulty. So that the MBE nationally scaled score is reliable. You think, really, what do they know? Well, they have an army of statisticians, and think about it, tens of thousands of people test their questions for them every year. So they have a lot of good data to go by. So California then takes that information and says, okay, we're going to use this to scale the essays of the people who took that same test. So let's say February 2023. They're going to say, on the MBE, what percentage of people in California scored 139, which is the equivalent of 1390, and at or above, I'd say at or above 139, or below 139, 138 or below. I guess since there's digits, it's like 138.9 or below. Anyway, what percentage of people? So let's say that, 45% of the people scored at 139 or higher in February. I don't know what it was. And 55% scored at 139, or rather below 139. Then they're going to take the range of scores on each essay and figure out where are we at, like how many would be like what percentage. So let me take 45 and 55 and put right in the middle there. We're going to call that a 63. So if that wasn't a 63, the way that people did the raw scoring, we're going to scale it to turn that into a 63. So the raw scoring might have been that was actually, a 63.84 or a 62. But then they'll make an adjustment because they'll say, okay, this was an easier or a harder question. We want them all to be scaled to the same difficulty. And they'll do that mathematical adjustment so that the raw score of that point that would be the equivalent of the 139 point in terms of percentage of people above and below for that exam, they will scale it so that point is 63.
Yeah,
I said that coherently. Jen? Okay,
yeah,
good.
Totally perfect. And if you're listening to that and you're like, oh my gosh, you guys, I didn't think this was going to be about math. Here's the key takeaway.
Thank you.
Not a scale, not a curve, right? So if I'm grading your crim law exams or your remedies exams, I can only give a certain percentage of A's. I can only give a certain percentage of A minuses. I can only give a certain percentage of B pluses.
As a law professor, right?
Yes,
As a law professor, that's your restriction.
So right, like it has to equal a bell curve. Scaling does not work like that. If every single person in America got above a 139 on the MBE, that's going to be the new zero, right? The best way to think about it is, when I was in high school, I had a biology teacher who was pretty tough, and he would sometimes give us these quizzes, and maybe like nobody got like higher than a 90% on this quiz. Okay, the 90% was the new 100.
Yeah.
That's what scaling is.
Oh, I don't think 90% sounds tough at all.
I was bitter.
Oh my gosh. There were classes in my undergrad where people like the 100 would be like 74. Like nobody knew what was going on in some of those classes. Those were the people who were doing hard sciences, and I was not. So yeah, it was them and the architecture students who I didn't sleep either, but for way different reasons than they didn't sleep. Anyway, so I hope between Jen's explanation and mine, it's not a curve. It's just based on, scaled off that 139. Hopefully that makes sense. That's where they get the scaled scores from those raw scores. Let's see. And I have, I said to go here. Okay. So I talked about the different performance considerations. We've talked about how close was my score. I want you to also think, when Jen is going through study methods, did I use these methods? Or did I devote enough time in my schedule? Maybe this exam, I've been away from the law a while, and I didn't realize how hard I'm a foreign lawyer, and I didn't realize how hard this was going to be. Or maybe I've always been real good at tests, and so I sort of took it for granted I'd be good at this one. California bar exam, man, it's its own crazy beast. I mean, the bar exams overall are hard, but California bar exam, you are special. I grew up in California, don't live there now, but y'all are special. See, I picked up a y'all somewhere along the way. English needs it, y'all. So if you didn't devote what you need to studying and you know you can fix that, if you didn't use the right methods and you know you can fix that, and you know your score is somewhere in that middle range, like, okay, I'm not up there with that person who got a second read, but I did a fairly strong performance, and you're not super burned out, then I want you to go for it. Let's talk about that burnout. These are the life considerations. If you want to throw out a window, do not force yourself to take the July bar exam. Do not do that to yourself. Like yourself better than that. You will not be successful at giving a half effort 5 times in a row. You would be better to take a time off and come back when you can give it focus. Because trying, oh, I did it at half effort, but this time my half effort will work. It's not, it's not that you have to devote more time. It's that your time, well, maybe you do. Maybe you didn't devote enough time. Do you have focused time? Do you have time when you can actually focus on the exam? When you're not exhausted, you're not like, oh, sure, I get home from work at 9 at night and I can study until midnight and I get up at 4. No, that you do not currently have a lifestyle that's going to let you study for the bar if you're not succeeding, have a realistic schedule for yourself, figure out what that's going to be. Jen will talk a little more about this. If you're having an illness that's impacting your ability to study, then maybe, you need to address that first. It's okay. We've seen this a lot. I have a dear friend who's going through that right now. It's like, okay, after the surgery, if it goes well, I can take February. I'm like, okay, you do what you got to do. If it's affecting your bar exam performance as opposed to your studying, like either a processing disorder or like I found out that I was in intense back pain because I do have, chronic lower back issues or a prior surgery, and I could not sit for that long, and it was incredibly distracting, then these are the issues where you want to consider getting an accommodation. I don't know, Katie, if you have the link to that accommodations webinar somewhere, or not webinar. Well, we have a webinar. We do have a webinar on getting accommodations. It's on the YouTube page, so look there. We also have a blog post about it. And I had a favorite student. She appears as Leah in the blog post, who filled the bar numerous times. And it turned out she just had a bit of a processing delay when trying to jump from one subject to another on the bar exam. And they gave her a little bit more time. And here she was. I don't even know how many times Leah took the bar, but this time she passed. And I was so happy for her. I'm still crying when I think about it because she really persevered and worked very hard every time. But she needed that little extra bit of time, and she applied for it, and she got less than she wanted, but a little bit was enough. And again, you may have financial concerns from family obligations that make this not the best time for you to study. It doesn't mean you can't later. It means that you need to come back with a plan at a time when you can make it work. Okay. And again, nobody has the perfect life or the perfect schedule. It's never going to be perfect. But if between your score being low and these factors being difficult, it's not a good time, then, it's okay to make that decision. Some people just study in the time that they have and they're still successful because they can be focused during that time after the kids go to bed. If you are doing well enough to be focused during that time and have just a moderate amount of points to make up, you can go for it. But these are the things you have to consider when making that decision. And I did say consider the extended study plan. And, when you're with BarMax, just write to support. We're going to give you whatever you need. It will be in the welcome packet for the February exam. It's not in the welcome packet right now because we're still, I found some errors, and, but we share it liberally with whoever wants to see it. Even if you just want to see it because you want to know what the extra essays are, ask support for the extended study plan for California, and they will send it to you. With that, I am done, Jennifer.
Okie dokie.
Yeah.
All right. So, I need you to stop sharing so I can share.
Oh, well, yeah, it's okay. I don't want to share with you.
Fine. I have 3 kids. Let me tell you, I'm a master of getting people to share.
You're raising good people. Amazing.
I'm trying, man. Let me tell you, it's hard. So I do want to talk, just super quickly about, kind of those things that Celeste mentioned there on, okay, we've looked at our scores. I failed. I know it's because I didn't know the law, or I know it's because I needed more time working with the MBE questions, or I know it's because I just, didn't know how to do the writing, or yeah, sure, I'm a practicing attorney and I should know how to do the PT, but it turns out I'm supposed to do it like a practicing attorney who's also using IRAC, which wasn't a thing when I was in school. And so like, what do I do, right? Like, what do I do about that? So in my experience, there's really kind of 3 reasons that people are going to fail the bar exam. The first is they ran out of time, which Celeste kind of mentioned, right? The second is they've studied the wrong way, which again, you got a good little preview there. And the third is they have some kind of anxiety or learning difference, physical difference, something's going on there. So when I talk about running out of time, what do I mean? I don't necessarily mean they ran out of time on the essays, although that can co-occur, right? Because a lot of times if you're running out of time on the essay, it's because you didn't have enough time to practice writing essays. And look, like sometimes this is just life stuff, right? We're all grown-ups. We're all like trying to manage things. Somebody gets sick, somebody gets married, your car breaks down, you have to go have surgery. It's all of the above. Sometimes it's really just that like you underestimated how difficult this would be. And I definitely see that from folks who are licensed in other jurisdictions. And they're sort of like, either, yeah, I just passed the bar exam in New Mexico. Of course I can do well in California. Or they're like, hey, I've been a practicing lawyer in New York for 30 years. Of course I can do well on the bar exam. And you just kind of you don't see how difficult it can be. So what do you do about that, right? Those of us who are not able to, put in the time, like, what do we do? The first thing that I want to tell you is that I don't want you to treat bar study, even if you're retaking it, as self-punishment. I want you, and this is for all of you who are sitting there going, oh my gosh, just thinking about opening up that BarMax app or looking at my books again, it makes me so mad, or it makes me cry, or it kind of makes my stomach knot up with anxiety. This is for you guys. I want you to make sure that you have a nice, comfy place to work. So for some of us, that's going to be at home. For some of us, that's going to be at a coffee shop. For some of us, that might be squirreled away in our rooms. For others of us, it might be sitting at a desk, whatever works well. I want you to experiment and see, do you study better with or without background noise? Now, I will tell you, growing up, my mom was definitely of the opinion that there's no way that you can study if you have the TV or the radio on. There are some folks who actually do study better that way, right? We do a little bit better when there's just enough there to distract us so that we can focus on what we're reading or learning. Then there's others of us where it's like, oh no, if there's anything else to think about, I'm going to think about that. There's that idea of, for some of us, we're going to get excited about office supplies. And I catch a lot of flack from time to time about my colored pen collection, but I love them and they help me do my work and my study, and I will use them as much as I want. So take yourself down to your local office supply store, get yourself some fancy pens, some of those little Post-it flags, get yourself some of those big Post-its that you can stick on the wall. Like, what would make you excited to use it? Think about whether you have folks. I think one of the things that's hard about bar study is it can be pretty isolating. So think about whether you have friends or family that you can bring into this. Can you, turn this into what my daughter used to call a work party, where, we would she and I and my sons would get out our work and we would all work together. And yeah, we weren't talking to each other, but just having somebody else there kind of would keep you on track. I used to do that from time to time with friends over Zoom as well, where again, it's just like, hey, it's 6:00, we're going to sign in. You're going to work on your stuff. I'm going to work on my stuff. And having that presence is helpful. Think about what you can do to reward yourself. And again, this, for some of you, you're like sitting there thinking like, am I a small child? But the answer is that sort of part of your brain that manages, do you want to do something, does work like a small child. Like, you're not going to get that necessarily like intrinsic reward right away. It's okay to set up external reward systems. So maybe it's, hey, if I can, do this, 20 minutes of study, I get to have a cookie. Or if I can finish this 3-hour study block, I get to watch an episode of my favorite TV show. Whatever it is that's going to make this pleasant, right? And you can borrow a little bit from what we know about psychology and exercise, right? What's the best exercise for anybody? Exercise that you enjoy doing, because you'll do it, right? So, same thing. What can we do here with bar study to make this something enjoyable? It's the same reason that, your gym, if you go to one of those fancy gyms, has the smoothies or whatever, right? It's like, let's get you here. You're going to have your delicious smoothie and you'll come back. So for you, if it's like, hey, I'm going to do this, bit of study, and then I'm going to check my social media, and that is something that will keep you coming back, do it, right? Think about breaks. One thing we see with repeaters is they'll sort of say, well, I needed to put in more time, so I'm going to, not take any breaks. Well, most of us can't pay attention for hours and hours and hours. There's a reason that your classes are generally scheduled in like 50, 75, 90-minute blocks. That's about what we can do before your brain kind of just is like, I'm done. So it doesn't have to be a long break. Study for an hour and then get up and get a cup of coffee, come back. Study for an hour, switch subjects or switch activities. Study for an hour and, take a break for lunch or whatever and come back. Think too about, what would benefit you, is there something about studying that's making it more difficult than it needs to be? So, you guys, there's tons of fidget spinners out there. This is one my daughter loves. She's also got the ones that actually spin. There's koosh balls that you can use. There's, even if you're just sitting there like tapping your pen, that can help. But like, hey, if you're sitting there like trying like, I just want to, and it's hard to sit there, it's going to be hard to put in the hours. Make it as pleasant as it can be. Okay. For some of you, something bad has happened or will happen or just happened, and you're trying to figure out, what do I do? There are certain people who go through a tragedy, right? Somebody's in the hospital, or they're going through a difficult breakup, or they've lost a family member or a pet or whatever it is. And it's just, for some of those folks, every time they try to think about thing X, this tragedy kind of interjects and they can't focus on the thing. And so they're just sitting there and they know they're supposed to be doing X, but instead they're thinking about the tragedy, and then they're beating themselves up because they're thinking about the tragedy instead of doing X. And what do we do? If you are that person, it may be difficult to recenter on the bar exam. You may be someone where it's like, yeah, maybe you should take a little break and regroup later when you've had some time to process. Alternatively, there are those of us where it's like, oh, thank goodness I can study for the bar because I need to not be thinking about XYZ thing, right? It's instead of like Calgon take me away, it's like bar exam take me away. And if you're that person, study, do it, delve in. Now, I will say, if you are somebody where you're like, yeah, I can't stop thinking about this horrible thing that happened, but I also have to pass the bar. I just cannot take a break. I know that might be best for me, but I can't. There are methods that, come talk with one of us. We can help you figure out how to manage that a little bit better. But ultimately in terms of the objective best, if you are someone who's having a lot of those intrusive thoughts about that tragedy, try to take a step back if at all possible. Okay. So we talked about, you've got a plan, what your life stuff is, and you're going to try to manage it, right? And for a lot of us, this is our plan, right? It's like, I'm just going to do my best and use maladaptive coping mechanisms. Here's the first thing I'm going to say to you. What can you get off of your plate? All right. And no task is too small. Can you set up a rotating system of chores for your kids so you are not the one identifying what needs to be done and then assigning the chores? Can you get in a cleaning company? Can you take your laundry out to be fluffed and folded somewhere? Can you set up a babysitting co-op with some other parents? Can you set your bills on automatic bill pay? Can you hire a lawn service? Like, what are the things that suck? And maybe you're like, Jen, come on. I have a super tiny yard in California. It's, the size of a postage stamp. I can mow it. Sure. But would it be easier not to have the emotional labor of having to remember to do it or the mental labor and the, necessity of actually spending the time to go do it? Get that off of your plate. I also want you to think about what are things that could come up during the bar that you could do now. So do you need to go get your well woman exam? Do you need to go in for your annual physical? Do you need to go in and get your teeth cleaned? Does your car need an oil change? What are those routine things that you can just take off of your plate now to minimize that disruption? I also want you to think about found time opportunities. And this is something that tends to work well if you have family obligations, work obligations. So you've got your MBE, you can do that on your phone, you can do it on your computer. So you're on hold with, your kid's doctor's office waiting to get a sick appointment. See if you can do 2 MBE questions, right? You are, I don't know, you're now you're at the doctor's office waiting to be called in. Bring your BarMax stuff with you, right? And practice those MBE questions. Do flashcards whenever you can. We have some that are like they're on your phone. You can flip them virtually. If you're, somebody where you're like, no, I'm going to make my own flashcards, you can punch a hole in them, stick a shower curtain ring in them, and carry them with you. Also think about ways that you can combine time, right? So one thing that we didn't really have when my kids were smaller were indoor playgrounds, but we definitely had playgrounds and we had kid-friendly activities. And there would definitely be okay, mom is taking you to say, I guess we did have McDonald's and we would go there, right? But like, mom is taking you to McDonald's and you're going to play in the ball pit while mom studies. And, that may allow you to bring your books, bring your computer, like come hang out, see what you can do. If you have family, and I'm going to say particularly if they're non-lawyer family members, they actually can super help with things like rote memorization. Because you're going to say something like, personal jurisdiction is, it's the power over the court to make a judgment about the person. And they're going to say personal jurisdiction personal jurisdiction is the power of the court to render a binding and effective judgment against the person. And you're like, oh my gosh, it means the same thing, which it does, but they don't know that. So they're really going to hold you to it. It also can sometimes help your family kind of understand what it is bar prep entails. So if you have that family that's like, I want to help, and their help is like, you are so smart, you can do this, which is great. But then they're like, hey, are you ready to come join us for, movie night? Are you ready to come join us for game night? Are you ready? And you're like, I can't. This is the kind of thing that can sometimes help them understand it a little bit better. I'm also going to suggest that you take that BarMax calendar and you adapt it to your own, what are we going to call it? Your own time management system. So if I've done this correctly, this will work. Which I did, except that you can't see it. So I have to go.
I think you have to get out of play mode, right? Like the one that I told you to get in.
I think I just have to switch it, hopefully.
Oh, that would be good. Well, switch what you're
There we go.
sharing.
Ta-da!
Yeah.
Okay.
Ooh.
So you might sit down and be like, hey, I'm going to start, counting back the weeks until bar week. And I'm going to say, what's coming up in here? Oh, Flag Day is the 14th. Let me put that in there. I don't know. Flag Day is maybe a big deal for you. Do you have a, maybe you need to do something for Memorial Day. You're going to put that in there. And you're going to look at that BarMax calendar and you're going to look at, can I get all that stuff in here? Right? You're going to adapt it to your own individual circumstances. Hey, I know I've got an oral argument coming up, May 23rd. I know I can't study May 22nd. Let's see if I can, move this stuff around. And I would suggest that you have this kind of like a monthly, or I guess a bar prep long schedule, but then also a weekly schedule where, you kind of go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then down this side, you've got your time. And so you can say like, hey, nine to, you know what? I don't know why I'm describing this instead of showing it to you guys. Let me show it to you. Which again, what is it doing? It's being challenging. Oh my gosh. No. There we go. So now. So this particular student, super hardworking guy and tends to work nights, right? So we kind of looked at, okay, what weekly, realistically, like what can you do? And so it was, all right, he tends to be the kind of guy who's going to get up at 8. He wants to spend some time just learning, some time doing essays and MBE questions. He's going to have lunch. Super big gym guy. If that's what brings you joy, if that's something that benefits you, we're going to make time for that. And then, hey, sometimes he has to go work. So you may want to lay it out like that so that you sort of have blocks of time and notice how specific it is, right? It's not, study torts. It's write a torts essay, right? And you would kind of go from the monthly calendar and you would say like, this was from a while ago, but like, oh, look, this is going to be crimes. So then when I get to Friday and it's like knowledge acquisition on what? Crimes. Write an essay on what? Crimes. And you're going to look at your BarMax schedule and you're going to see, so what crimes essay should I be looking at? And you can integrate it in this way, in a way that is effective and useful for you. Okay, then we're going to go back over here.
That is so good on the scheduling tips, the overall, like, okay, mapping what I need to cover in these, whatever, how many weeks I have left, and then taking each week and breaking it down to your hourly schedule and saying, okay, now I'm going to plug the BarMax assignments in there. That's really good.
And if you're looking at this and you're like, Jen, that's great, I guess, but I am not a, the kind of person that's going to use an Excel spreadsheet for that or whatever. That's fine, right? Like you can use your Google Calendar. You can use your, I really like the Happy Planner. And I joke a lot that I do a lot of kitten fostering. So my little Happy Planner says all you need is love and a cat. But it's got everything. It's got my kids' stuff. It's got my stuff. That's fine. There's no magic in using an Excel spreadsheet. Use what works for you. Okay, Jen, I have laid out this amazing, lovely plan. And it's not quite fitting together the way that I thought it was going to, right? Like I was supposed to spend, Friday night studying crimes, but it turns out it was my wedding anniversary and I totally forgot that when I made my chart. And what do I do? Well, one of the reasons that you have these sort of specific blocks is that you are going to see, can I find, okay, it was supposed to be 3 hours of crime study. I don't have the 3 hours of crime study anymore. Where can I move that? And if you have to rearrange, I don't want you to just start at the top and work your way down. I want you to think to yourself, what is most effective for me? What do I most need to spend time on, and do that? So if you are that person who was, kicking butt and taking names on the MBE, but struggling with writing, and you were planning to do crimes essay, crimes MBE during your wedding anniversary by accident, and you're like, I can't find time to do both, you're going to do that essay because you know that's the area that you need. If you're looking at your upcoming week and you're like, I was going to do con law, but I can tell I just got this new assignment at work. I know I can't do it. Maybe you're going to spend a little bit less time on that because you're that person who kind of kicked butt and took names in con law. And there you go. So, don't just start at the top, go down, right? For those of us who may be struggling with motivation, sometimes it's easiest, the advice that yes, I should start with what's most important is great advice, but you're not able to implement it, right? What do you do then? Sometimes it works to start with what is easiest or quickest and kind of let it snowball into those more difficult tasks. I also want you to think about high energy tasks, low energy tasks, and when your time is either high energy or low energy. So we saw our colleague there who is a kind of guy who's going to go work at night. That's when he has energy. He's great at that. Let me tell you, folks, up until, maybe 5 or 10 years ago, I would think I can just pull an all-nighter. I can do whatever. I now know that about 10 or 11 o'clock at night, my brain just stops working. I should not be scheduling difficult tasks for 10 or 11 o'clock at night, right? My kids go to bed at 9. I can definitely get some good studying in from 9 to 11. I mean, that may be true, but those should not be your high energy tasks if that's not a high energy time for you. Similarly, when I decided to take the California bar, I had been helping folks prepare for the Nevada bar. And I was like, I know I need to do some essay writing. I'm going to write, an essay every morning. Friends, I am not a morning person. I will tell you that happened about twice. I did much better when I was like, I'm going to take my lunch break and write my essay question. And I'm going to take that early morning time and do some MBE questions. So think about that as well. Don't try to shoehorn yourself into being the type of circadian rhythm that you don't have. All right, so that's all the life stuff. What about studying the wrong thing? And Celeste touched on this pretty significantly, right? And hey, by the way, the artist of this, what's now become a meme, is Ali Broche. She's amazing. She writes a blog and then a book called Hyperbole and a Half. It's hysterical. I encourage everybody to take a look at it. What do we mean by studying on the wrong thing? One, the person who is focusing just on memorizing. Now, I used to get really frustrated because professors will say memorization will not help you. I mean, that's true. You can't just memorize, but it's more that hey, there's this whole level above memorization. And so where memorization might have helped you on that high school biology quiz, it's not going to help you on, it won't be enough to get you through the bar exam. Then you get folks who are like, I can't possibly write an essay because I don't understand what's going on. I want you to practice. That's part of the open book study method. Feel free to grab, your book and use that to help you answer it. That's going to help you understand that law even better. Same thing in terms of memorization. We know that testing yourself is one of the most effective ways to memorize things. Then you get folks who will look at they're going to practice questions, but they're not even going to look at the model answers. And then the last type is the person who's really engaged in passive learning. They're rereading and reading and rereading the outlines, but they're not really doing anything more than that. Maybe they're highlighting. They're listening to the lectures. They're writing some essays, but they're not getting feedback. I want you to be as active as you can. So for a lot of us, our instinct when we're going to study is that reading and rereading, because that's what's tended to work for us thus far. And somebody says, be active. And we're like, okay, I'm going to highlight. That's not what I mean. What I mean is the open book study method. Celeste did an amazing presentation on that. Go check it out. Feel free to make your own flashcards or use ours. Think about, the flash sheets, which can be just like flow charts that are kind of set up in that way. Write essays, get, feedback on them. Use your MBEs, right? Do it. And here's what I want. As you're answering the question, have your book open next to you. Check the answer. As you finished looking at that, check the answer in the thing right away, right? A lot of times we think like, well, I got to work on my timing, and you do, but I want you to work on the law first and getting feedback about, whether or not what you're doing is effective, right? We would never take a little kid and be like, hey, here's a book about soccer. And at the end of the next 13 weeks, we're going to test you by having you play soccer. We would be like, here's a book about soccer. Here's a coach that can help you get better at soccer. Here's some, things you can listen to about soccer. And now you're going to go play soccer. Same thing for the bar exam, right? You've got to have that aspect of reading the outlines. You've got to get feedback about what you're producing. You've got to have the opportunity to play. If you take away nothing else, I want you to think about practicing the essays and the MBEs, right? I need you to know that it's much about thinking about how it's tested as it is about learning what is tested, right? So there are certain things that come up over and over and over again. You need to know those things. You need to be able to recognize them. The only way you're going to get there is by looking at a bunch of those essay questions. You also need to learn the language of the MBE, right? So there's one question where they talk about a gust of wind being sudden. And apparently, according to the MBE folks, that is unforeseeable. But that's not, to me, I'm like, well, sudden, how could a gust of wind be so sudden that it was unforeseeable? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's in MBE land, sudden means unforeseeable. And one of the reasons that you're doing those questions is to learn that language. We talked about that. Sometimes folks say, well, should I use the model answers? I notice sometimes the law in there is incorrect. Yes, sometimes the law in those representative good answers is incorrect. That should make you feel good that you don't necessarily have to know every rule perfectly to do quite well on the bar. What you should be able to use those bar exam answers for, and what some folks do is, they're just going to look and see like, okay, I talked about negligence. They talked about negligence. I talked about negligence per se. They talked about negligence per se. That's useful, but it's not the most useful thing. Look at how they organized, right? Is there some way about the way that they organize that makes more or less sense to you, right? Look at their rule statements. Do you like their rule statements? Great, steal them. Same thing with those MBE answers. If there are, answers that give rule statements in there and you're like, heck yeah, these make a lot of sense to me, steal them. How did they use the facts? Are they giving an argument, counter argument? Are they using the same facts in different ways? Are they using conflicting facts? I think sometimes we get hung up on like, I have to come to a conclusion. But what exactly does that mean? Sometimes the conclusion is really just an evaluation. Great, Jen. What do either of those look like? Go look at some representative good answers. Let's find out. All right. So you've studied the right way, but your issue is really kind of memorization, right? And hey, by the way, if you are in this place of like the bar exam is unfair, this is ridiculous. I've been, working in a law office for years, and granted, I'm not a licensed attorney yet, but I do a lot of attorney-based things. And this whole thing is nonsense. You're 100% right. There's been a ton of scholarship and writing about how the bar exam doesn't test what most lawyers do. And the example I always give is the one I found in this, little cartoon here. There's never going to be a time that your client's going to walk into your office and say, quick, tell me everything you know about negligence, but don't look anything up. That's terrible, right? But what are you going to do? So the first thing that I'm going to say is, think about improving your retention by how you learn. So for me, I really like flowcharts. So we have some great attack sheets in there. I'm going to be taking those, turning them into flowcharts. I'm going to be sticking them up around my house. In fact, if I look over at my coffee machine right now, right above my coffee machine, where I, not being a morning person, sort of stand there in the mornings and stare into space, there's a list of all the foods that my dog is allergic to, because I'm trying to memorize that. My kids are similar. When my daughter was working to memorize the Scouts of America pledge, that was hung up in our bathroom mirror so she could look at it while she brushed her teeth. If that's you, do it. If you are somebody who benefits from, flashcards, use them. If you know that you're going to do better with colors and pictures, do that. If you know that you're going to do better taking notes if you take them by hand, do it. And there is some data for that, by the way, that people are going to remember better things they handwrite over things they type. If you know that listening to lectures is how you're going to acquire information, you should do that. And I will tell you, I am terrible at remembering things I hear. If you come to me and you're like, Jen, let me tell you about blah, blah, blah thing, I'm either going to be taking notes myself, or I'm going to say to you, hey, can you text me that, right? My middle son, absolutely the opposite. Could hear something once and remember it. Great. You know what? When we're thinking about, improving his memory, he should be the guy who's listening to the BarMax lectures, right? Whereas I might get, as much benefit from looking at those BarMax outlines, rewriting them, for myself. And you want to think about remembering both the individual rules, right? Like I need you to be able to say, an offer must be made in such specific and definite terms that invites the offeree to conclude that his or her acceptance is all that's needed to complete the bargain. And I need you to be able to say, contract is offer, acceptance, consideration, right? So you have to know both. Keep in mind that getting enough sleep and getting enough exercise have both been demonstrated to improve retention. So those are things we tend to cut as soon as we feel pressed for time, but they're actually super helpful in creating memories and retaining new information. So make sure you're getting enough sleep and exercise. Okay, the third reason that people are going to fail is they just have anxiety, man. And you want to keep in mind that anxiety can be both acute and chronic. Chronic anxiety, which sometimes is called generalized anxiety, can be managed, right? This is the stuff like, getting on medication if you need that. It's exercising, it's sleeping, it's having social support that can be, your bar exam prep friends. It can be your church family. It can be your biological family. It can be the folks you do community theater with. It can be your D&D group. But who are the people in your life that you can turn to for support? There's been a lot of research on mindfulness and that being effective. And we do have a lecture on, bringing mindfulness into the preparation for the bar exam. There's things on breathing. Journaling can be helpful. And the sweet spot for journaling tends to be between 15 to 20 minutes, less than 15, and people really aren't getting out what they need to get out. More than 20, and they're kind of getting stuck. But let's say you're one of those people who's going through some kind of really concerning tragedy, and you're trying to forge ahead with studying anyway. Taking 15 minutes before you begin your substantive prep to just write, like, here's everything I'm worried about. Your subconscious mind is going to stop trying to remind you about this thing that you're worried about because you've shown it, I'm writing this down. What about the test anxiety itself? Day of, not generalized anxiety, actual anxiety. Like I'm in the exam, whatever. Okay, so the first thing that I will say is, it is surprising the number of people I've asked, do you have any test anxiety? And they say no. And then I ask them, okay, do you have any kind of a pounding heartbeat? Are you ever sweaty? Are you ever shaky? Do you have dry mouth? Are your shoulders up here and you're hunched over like this? And they're like, yes. And I'm like, okay, friend, that is test anxiety. A little bit of test anxiety is a good thing, right? A little bit of test anxiety gives you that punch of adrenaline, and you can throw out what you're trying to throw out quickly and easily. But, too much test anxiety can actually turn off the sort of executive functioning and put you into the fight, flight, freeze mode, where you're like, oh my gosh, what do I write about this? So we want you to work through your test anxiety. How are you going to do that? The first thing that I want you to think about is exposures, okay? Test anxiety is like any other fear. The more exposure you have to it, the easier it's going to be. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. This is going to be hard, but you can do it. You're going to start with taking that exam at home in your bunny slippers. Take as much time as you want. Do it open book. You can look at the answer. I don't care. Whatever you need to get yourself through that exam. Then I'm going to ask you to move into, okay, it's a timed exam. So you've got that time pressure, but you still have that security blanket of looking up the rules if you need to. Then I'm going to say, what about, timed closed book, but, you're still at home in your bunny slippers. And the last thing I'm going to say is, can we make this as much like exam conditions as possible? Can you go to the exam center and look around the room? Can you go to the library to take your exam? Can you get some friends to be, over there like typing while you're still reading? What can you do to kind of slowly ratchet up that anxiety so that you're building a tolerance to it? The other thing that I'm going to say is really helpful for those of us who are going to have test anxiety is going to be what is called over preparation. Two things that work: exposures, over preparation. So where for most folks, it's sort of like you want to be at 100% prepared. Those of you who have test anxiety may need to be at 110% prepared. What are you going to do on exam day? The first thing that I want to do is, again, let's take everything off your plate that we can. I want you to go in a little bit early, figure out where you're going to sit, have a backup plan in case your car breaks down, right? Silly stuff like that, like can just take that space out of your brain, right? Plan your lunch, pack your lunch, know what you're going to wear, have your little bag of comfort supplies, right? Like I know I'm one of those people where if I do not have chapstick, I'm going to be an unhappy camper. So I'm going to make sure I have chapstick, in my bag of stuff I'm going to leave in the lobby. For some folks, it's helpful to kind of like get in the groove. Advice in the old days used to be like, oh, read a newspaper article. But nowadays the advice tends to be more like, do a couple questions. And in particular, if they're easy questions that you've gotten right in the past, because then it kind of boosts your confidence in addition to warming up your sort of mental acuity. Keep in mind, you get in there, right? And you're like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, I can't, what am I doing? Couple of things. One, think about your breathing strategies. So there's box breathing. You're breathing in for 4, holding for 4, breathing out for 4, holding for 4, breathing for 4, holding for 4, breathing out for 4, holding for 4. That can help. You can do just deep breaths. Like that can be helpful. You can tense and relax. Think too about having something that you kind of remind yourself that can be helpful. So one of the things that my inner voice can tell me when I'm being anxious is like, I can't do this. I can't do this. And sometimes just reminding myself like, Jen, you are doing it can be helpful. So having that little bit of a mantra can be good. And that mantra can be something that's super personal to you. Like for me, where it's like, a response to my inner critic, but it also could be something more general that's just like a happy quote that or a line from a song, or a bit of inspirational reading that you have memorized. It doesn't matter. What you're trying to do is break that inner voice that's telling you all the things that are wrong and reset. Speaking about that, one thing that can be helpful, just get up. Go to the back of the room, and for most of us, we're going to be taking it in the those big conference rooms. At the back, there's usually a bathroom. Get up, go wash your hands in the bathroom. A lot of times, somewhere along your aisle, there's going to be some water. Get up and go get a drink of water. Oh my gosh, Jen, you don't understand. I'm already running behind. Fine. I would so much rather that you lose a couple of minutes because you miss a couple of questions, you don't hit a particular issue because you went to go get a glass of water, but you get everything else on the page, then that you miss a whole bunch of things because you're sitting there going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, right? No, go do what you need to do. Celeste mentioned that there are some folks who may discover that they have learning disabilities during law school or during bar prep. Not uncommon at all. And that can include anything from ADHD to visual processing disorders, what we used to call dyslexia, anxiety, that kind of thing. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on that because you do have the link to the excellent blog post. There are some symptoms. You can Google them yourself if you like. You can check out that blog post. Sometimes folks will say, why would I want to do that? Well, because you can get accommodations, which can be anything from like get up and stretch because you have a bad back, to use voice to text because you have carpal tunnel, to take your exam with extra time, or take your exam in a quiet room, or be allowed to bring in your diabetes meds, right? The last thing that I would say is folks will say, well, how do I do it? Super quick overview here. One, you may need to get tested, which sometimes means seriously like laying out for a particular, type of psychological evaluation. If this is something you think you need to get moving on it. Sometimes it means just going to the doctor and having them fill out the paperwork that says, yeah, this person has a bad back and they need to be allowed to stretch every so often. After you're tested, usually your doctor will make recommendations. So she'll say, hey, it would be really good for you to be able to bring in your pillow, or you're someone who should be allowed to have the test in larger font, or you're someone who should get a quiet room and noise canceling headphones. If she doesn't make those recommendations, you should ask her. And for those of you who are going to apply for disability accommodations, this is the single most important thing I'm going to say. You're then going to take all of these forms and you're going to submit them to the bar examiners. And one of those forms asks for your narrative of your disability. You're going to tell us, what's the disability? I have dyslexia. What symptoms does it cause? It makes it really difficult for me to read. Letters appear in different orders. It's very difficult for me to spell clearly. What accommodations are you seeking? I need extra time for the reading of the exam, and I need the ability to use voice to text for my answer. How's that going to fix it? Well, the extra time will give me the ability to read and reread and kind of translate the question, and the extra time or the voice to text allows it to come out in a way that is comprehensible. The other thing, so you just need to answer those 4 questions in your narrative, all right? The last thing that I want you to think about with that narrative is if there's any potential weakness, talk about it, right? Oh, I haven't applied for accommodations previously because I was only recently diagnosed with blah, 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 blah. I had a person who got long COVID, right? Why didn't she apply for, accommodations before in law school or whatever? Because she didn't have long COVID. But you want to tell them that, right? That that's what's going on here. So 3 things, right? You're going to look for what's going on in your life. How do you set your life up for success? You're going to look at how can you make sure that you're using your study time well, and you're going to remove any barriers like anxiety or learning disabilities from your environment to the extent you can. Okay, there we go.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's great. So that last one, we have as someone who's really an expert at helping students get accommodations and walking them through the process. Jennifer as well, but also Lavanya, and she's done that webinar and helped and co-authored the blog post that I recommend. So do look at those because there's some specifics about that. We are pretty much done with the main content here, and there weren't a lot of questions this time. So if you have questions, you can throw them into chat or Q&A now, and we will take them. But otherwise, I can do just, a bit of a demo of BarMax, if anyone needs that, and then we can call it kind of a day. Does that sound good, Katie and Jen? Because we are at an hour and a half, so we don't want to go too much longer. But I said I would show these things. Anyway. I'll do that real quick.
So the person who had asked you about the question says they appreciate it. Thanks for the explanation. And I'll just tag on and say, if you're like, well, what's the deal with waiting for explanations? one of the things that I think makes BarMax really unique is the commitment to using real released questions. And so that means we are, using questions that the National Conference of Bar Examiners has released, and we are looking to the people who are actually giving you the test. What explanations do they provide? And then we're going to beef those up, as necessary. But
no, for those we didn't provide any.
I know.
Yeah, so we're doing those. Yeah, for
so
those.
That's why we love those questions because they're released from the bar examiners. But the bar examiner, unlike some of the other questions where we can give you what the bar examiner said, here we've got to make them up. So
yeah, and we wrote a lot of the other ones too. They actually didn't release a whole heck of a lot of answers. They released answers to civil procedure and the OPEs. The rest are ours, and even some of the ones that they've released, we've clarified.
Yes, it's true.
We've clarified, so we're working on that. That's part of what I do here. So more going on in chat. Let's see. What attorney bar only packages do you offer? I do not know, because it is the same thing as the California bar exam in terms of content, but you don't need the MBE questions. And I think we take out the MBE licensing fee and give you a lower price, but I am not sure on that. So you're going to have to shoot your email over to Katie, like PM your email to Katie, and she will hook you up with the right information on that.
And what I usually tell folks who want to do the attorney's exam is I want you to at least do 100 MBE questions, because sometimes what we discover is that these folks are kicking butt and taking names on the MBE, and it actually would give them a little bit of padding, right? But then sometimes it's more of what we would expect of okay, it's a whole nother skill set to learn how to do the multiple choice questions. Do I really want to do that or not? But even if you're 99% sure, do 100 questions.
Yeah, so they would need the whole California course for that. So it would be the same thing as the California bar exam course. You would just approach it using the extended study calendar essays, ask us for that, the extended study plan, using those essays as your guideline really, and go through a ton of essays and skip all the parts that are MBE questions. But I do like your suggestion, Jen, of figuring out whether MBE is something that you should just do anyway. I think for most people, that's a no. You just want to focus on essay writing, but good to check. So I am in BarMax right now. And I'm going to go, just for those of you who are using BarMax and haven't yet encountered that welcome packet, I'm going to go there first by going to my profile. So this is me, and I'm currently in the California course. If I want to view the welcome packet, this used to be a big old download, and it is not. Now everything I need is right here. So if I am looking at my calendar and it says, do February 2018 question 2, I can go here and look at February 2018 question 2, make my little outline. If I know this isn't one I'm going to write fully, but it's one I'm going to outline, I'm going to spot all the issues I can, but then I want to look at the California answers. Here they are right here in the same document, very easy to access. Okay, so if you're following along on the calendar and you said, okay, I'm on constitutional law. This was a question that was assigned to me. Then you can do, your whole outline, all your issue spotting. I would say when you're issue spotting, don't just issue spot and then read the answers. Issue spot, go to the BarMax outline and look at the rules. You can actually have this open on 2 separate tabs if you want to have the outline and the question open side by side, or you can use the handy dandy, I always have it way over here. You can always use the handy dandy book, the BarMax Outlines book, in order to look at the rules and the questions side by side, or you can use one device for the question, one device for the books, or even print out the question. Whatever way you do it, I want you looking at the rules and the questions side by side, so that when you find the right rule, you then say, aha, okay, I knew it was testing something in due process or whatever that was. And I'm going to go to the due process section and I'm going to find the subsection. I'm going to read the rule and the exceptions to figure out if an exception applies here. And then I'm going to go back and read the facts for a second time and figure out how this rule applies to these facts. So when you are just reviewing an essay, open book means you're looking at the BarMax outline. But when you are done, then you go and, when you've exhausted, this as much as you can, and, squeezed all the juice out of this one that you can, then you want to go ahead and read the sample answers and figure out what were the primary issues, obviously free exercise here, and what were the answers that were rewarded with high scores by California. So you can do that for any essay. Here we have a motion to suppress. This looks like probably a criminal procedure question, and boom, Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. So again, you are going to read it. You're going to say, aha, it's a criminal procedure question. I've just been studying criminal procedure, so let me look for the specific rule that might be implicated by these facts. That's what we mean by open book method. And so that's where you'll find things here. If you get toward your bar exam and you say, okay, I've studied, but now I just want to review a ton of essays in business associations so that I'm ready and I see the frequently tested issues over and over again, then you can just do all the business associations ones. They're kind of in chron order. Look at this. What is this? February 2009, February 2010, October 2020. So July 2022. So wow, they follow through, pretty much the last more than 10 years. So very, very useful resource here in the California Welcome Packet. If I want to get back to the course, I go to all subjects and I'm here in the main course where I'm looking at my various lecture segments, my flashcards on that lecture segment if I want to review it, and my multiple choice just for that segment. In this example, I've come to Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendment. So here I am on criminal procedure. It is a heavily tested area. It's also a very long lecture because there's a lot of law covered. So in this one, we have 14 questions we want you to do after the lecture. And again, we want you to do them open book. These are not here to test you. These are here to train you. Don't look at the questions as testing tools. Look at the questions as teaching tools when you do them side by side with the outline open. So first you read the call of the question, the court should. That's a useless call of the question, doesn't tell us what it's about. So then we go here, police received an anonymous tip, used a helicopter, identified. We say, using a helicopter, is that legit? And we go look in the BarMax outline. Sure enough, aerial view, that's okay. But you're going to go find it if you didn't know it for sure already. You're going to see where it fits in the search part of the outline. And you are going to select your answer only after figuring out for yourself, what would the answer be? I haven't even looked at the answer choices yet, but I've looked at the call, the question, I've looked at the facts, I've looked at the rule, and I've reasoned through myself. And then I go, okay, does one of these, match my reasoning, what I think the court should do, and pick it. And then when you do pick it, I'll pick D because I pick D whenever I don't read something and I just go across the board. Sorry, it was right. Oh yeah, actually, no, this one. I always just pick D if I'm demoing a product. I pick D a lot. If I have picked a random question. But here you go. You can read the answer explanation for the correct answer. And if you knew why these were wrong, it's good to read the answer explanation, make sure that you understood correctly why they were wrong, that you didn't think, oh, that's wrong, but for a different reason. You want to know the reasoning. So again, you want to milk each question for all it's worth. When you are done doing, for example, hearing crimes, all of the lecture segments and all of the multiple choice questions after the lectures, you're going to go back to your California course page and you're going to click MBE questions, and you're going to find here we have another 206 questions for you to work from. You have 206 questions. And as I said, at this point, I would recommend you start from number 31, and you will work still open book, slowly. In fact, we want to make sure that you're in study mode here, not in test mode. You're not studying yourself. You're not testing yourself. You're using these materials to teach you the law. Why do we do this? It's an active approach. You're engaged with the outline and the facts together, instead of, I'm going to engage with the rules and then I'm going to read a bunch of facts. No, you're doing them side by side so that you recognize how they test this rule. And now when you think of this rule, you'll think of this example because they're stuck together in your head. So I always recommend that for most of your study. When you come back to the MBE questions page, you'll see that we do have online practice exams. These OPEs are 100 questions each. And the complete practice exam, which is the most recent questions we have from NCBE, is 200 questions. So we have 600 questions we want you to use for testing yourself periodically along the way. And so don't worry about testing yourself the first time you go through the material. Worry about using the questions as your teaching tools, because to pass the bar exam, just knowing the rule is not enough. It doesn't get you anywhere by itself. As Jen mentioned, that you need to know how the rule applies on the exam. And the way you do that is by looking at the rule side by side with the fact patterns that apply it. So that is the main study method that we recommend. We also have a ton of videos. Oh, look at this. Last minute survival strategies for the MBE. I think I have this on just general strategies right now. No, I have it on everything. Wait, why is this? I feel like I need to reset this. This is not in order. Okay, here we go. Oh yeah, no, that was the last one, last minute survival strategies for the MBE. So you can see that we have strategy questions, but we also have things like professional responsibility, greatest hits, property law, easements and mortgages. So we have some that are very substantive. We have an upcoming session on kind of the big picture in constitutional law, where Nate is going to sort of diagram constitutional law and how it all fits together. And we have an upcoming session on hearsay and one on conveyancing, which is the most tested area in property law. So we have several good, Lavanya's going to do business associations and pictures. She's going to draw blobs and explain the relationships between entities and the people who are involved in those entities. So that's going to help those who like to see things visually come to that one. So all those are coming up this office hours season. If you're on the office hours page and you want to see the upcoming schedule, here you go. Constitutional law, conveyancing, hearsay, if I push over to the right. Outlining California essays, Jen, that's you. Taste anxieties, science-based strategies for management, that's you, Jen. So some of these are strategies and some of them are hard law, like parallel evidence and contract interpretation, which is me and Nate. Crimes against, conveyancing is Melissa. Anyway, so we have a lot of good content lined up for you, but the main course content, the thing that everyone needs, is right here in our key course modules. Finally, if you upload your essays for grading, we have graders grading now. We're getting a couple essays a day, even now. So when the bar exam is a little closer when we get to the end of June. It gets really busy on submitting essays. So submit your essays now, get feedback on your writing now. You will get very quick feedback. And then submit practice, get feedback, submit some more practice, get more feedback. That way you're continually improving. Do the same thing with your California performance test. And finally, if you want to purchase tutoring, that is another option for you as well. I'm going to stop sharing this, go back to sharing the other thing I had shared earlier.
So Andrea asked, or Andrea, depending on how you say it, how long does a person have from when they first become eligible to take the first year baby bar to the time to take it? So for those of you who are, may not, so remember I said I sponsor or I foster rescue cats. This is a mama cat who is coming to join me for a moment here, I guess. She was like, you've had enough time to speak uninterrupted. So the so-called baby bar, also called the first year law students exam. Some students who attend some schools in California must take the first year law students exam. And you can wait to take it after your first year. Like some folks will go on to a second year of school. Some law schools are not going to permit you to do that. And the idea is because the California Board of Bar Examiners is not going to give you credit for your first year of law study until you have passed the first year law students exam. So, and friends, again, if you are like, what the heck is the first year law students exam?
Don't worry about it.
Yeah, probably not for you. Don't worry. But the simple answer to how long do you have is as long as you want, with the caveat that the California Board of Bar Examiners not going to give you credit for any classes you take after the first year until you pass it. And many schools are not even going to permit you to continue taking courses until you pass it. And Andrea's asking this question because assistance with the first year law students exam is something that BarMax offers. Yes. All the same stuff that Celeste just showed you, but sample essays, sample model answers from the first year law students exam.
And who teaches that exam is a wonderful tutor for BarMax.
That would be me.
Jen. That's why she knows so much about it. Jen worked out for California at California law schools, and she's very familiar with this exam. So before we go, I just want to thank you all for being here. We hope that you feel a little more prepared now in making that decision on whether to retake now or take a break. We hope that you feel prepared with BarMax resources like the extended study plan that we can send you. Like BarMax, if you don't use it already, like BarMax tutoring, like the study methods and getting your essays graded that we have recommended, and also just the scheduling and life management factors and ways to make sure that your bar study is a success next time, whether that's for July or February of next year. We want your next time to be a success. You can ask us more questions by writing to support@testmaxprep.com or hitting the support button within BarMax. We really, really want to see you succeed. We hear rough news sometimes from students, but we also get a whole lot of emails and text messages and, saying, I passed. And that absolutely makes our day. And we look forward to the day that we get that from you. And with that, Jen, thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm so glad I could be here. This was awesome. And like Celeste says, we love hearing good news, and we are sure that we're going to hear it from you guys soon. And we encourage you to reach out.
Bye-bye.